Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Muhoza Rwabukamba. Today is actually a very special day this month. The Rwandan community, starting April 7th, it's the time we remember those who perished. It's really a memorial period for some, it's an opportunity to talk about what happened. It's a healing moment for us. So thank you for being part of that. I will invite the two other Rwandans in the room to light the candle. It's basically a symbol of light, hope for the survivors. And thank you. This is my son, Kyle, and my sister, Albertine.
Welcome, everybody here, everybody at home. My name is Matt Goodwin, and I teach 7th grade right up the street at John Reed Middle School. I've been very fortunate to hear this story in my classroom as it's been shared with my 7th grade students over the last couple of years. And so I can promise you that if you haven't heard it before, what you're going to hear tonight is very powerful. It's very moving, but it's really important because if nobody's telling the story, then there's no way we can hear the story. And then this history is lost and it gets repeated, unfortunately, over and over again. So these are not my stories to tell. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over and enjoy the evening. Thank you all for being here.
So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Ed Ballen. I've known Muhoza for many years. I also run a nonprofit in Rwanda, and I'm thrilled that you guys are out. And I hope that the interview tonight, I got to compose questions. So I'm a wannabe Bill Moyers. So I love the opportunity to do this. And I hope it's a really rich evening with a lot of reflection so that you can connect it to your lives. It's not just Rwanda. I often say Rwanda is not just a country, it's a state of consciousness that we experience in this country as well. So I look forward to having a really reflective conversation tonight.
The conversation. So it's really a conversation. If you have gotten to meet Rwandans, we like to talk a lot. But we don't do therapy. That's our way of healing. So welcome, enjoy our conversation. And there will be a time for questions and to continue the discussion. Thank you.
And I noticed coming in, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's apropos that we're having this conversation. So my first question, Muhoza, can you describe your life before the genocide?
Wow, I like that question because that's really when life was perfect, as far as I can remember it. In the mind of a 13-year-old, life was perfect. I was a teenager, worried about what kind of shoes to wear, what TV show to watch, what car I'm gonna drive when I grow up. And everything changed in one night. I do remember going to bed like a regular life, but I do remember in the middle of the night, I could hear movements that were quite unusual, but I really did not know that it was the beginning of the new life. So before the genocide, I had many siblings. The house was full of joy, fun. My parents love to have guests. So it's almost every Friday night, Saturday night, the house was full of guests coming and going. So it was really a privileged life in Africa, believe it or not. There is a lot of good, fun things to do in Africa. And it was really a good life, a perfect family life.
I don't know how many people know any of the history of Rwanda, so I'm going to use the word ethnicity. However, ethnicity wasn't named until Rwanda was colonized. So it's important to know that there are Hutus and Tutsis were not distinguished by ethnicities. It was more considered a class difference, probably. So how was ethnicity discussed in your family before the genocide, given that your parents from quote, different tribes?
Yeah, so good thing you mentioned it. I always consider myself mixed because my mother is Hutu and my father is a Tutsi. So you originally take the tribe from your father. In my home, it was never discussed. that much. I do remember the first time I could recall the Tutsi and the Hutu really being brought up. The first introduction wasn't necessarily good. It was in 1990, when in the morning, the police, the gendarme, they call them, they came and grabbed my father and took him, and he was jailed for 9 months. And the whole scene of being grabbed and thrown in a pickup truck, I didn't even know. The guard, he's the one who said, yeah, they've taken him because he's a Tutsi. And I was like, what is a Tutsi? He's like a cockroach. Basically, he said he's a cockroach. I was like, what is a cockroach? He's like, a Tutsi. So I didn't know. And I remember maybe a week later, we went to school and the teacher was like, yeah, who's a Tutsi, who's a Hutu? And people went in one room. So that's really 1990 that I started seeing. But then after a while, things settled and it wasn't really a discussion in my home because obviously I was young, I didn't know, but because it was a mixed family, I don't think it was something they necessarily wanted to bring up in the home. So outside of my home, I would hear it, but I didn't really pay attention because that's not how we were raised.
This is a spontaneous. Was it common during that time that marriages were mixed or not?
Not necessarily, I won't say it was the case. For example, I mean, the story that I was told is that my parents could not get married actually. And they were in love and they wanted to get married. So they decided to kind of get pregnant because if you make someone pregnant, then you kind of forced to marry them. So that's why they named me Muhoza, because it means the one who wipes the tears away, because it kind of, made them get married. So the baby was born and it was named Muhoza because I kind of wiped the tears away from my family or their relationship. So it wasn't a given. It's better now than it used to be then. So yeah, it wasn't a given. It wasn't easy, but it was happening here and there. Yeah.
What was the first moment of knowing that the genocide was happening? And how did your parents share what was happening?
I would say the first moment was the morning after when my parents got us together and they said, well, something bad has happened. What is it? The president has died. Now, as a Tutsi child, the president wasn't necessarily friendly to the Tutsis. So I was like, hey, he's dead, he's a bad guy. And my father looked at me and said, it's not good, it's really bad. And they start saying, we could hear, my house was, Rwanda, it's full of hills and valleys, but you could see and hear the hills smoke. Houses were starting to get burned in the villages. But I was 13 years old. I mean, I couldn't make sense of this, right? But it clicked when my father picked up the phone rang, and my uncle called, and he was basically from the city in Kigali. And in Kigali, the killing had already begun pretty much immediately after the president died. My hometown was really a very small town, so they did not take action right away. But from the city, people had already started getting killed. So he called and was basically explaining what's going on. And while he was on the phone, they start banging on his door in his house. And he dropped the phone to go open the door. And my mom was still on the phone. And immediately she heard the gunshots in the house and his wife screaming. And she was like, oh, they're killing him, they killed him, they killed him. So literally my uncle, who by the way is a Hutu, died while my phone was on the other side. My mother was on the other side on the phone. So then even I think for my parents, that's when it really clicked.
So we're going to shift a little bit. Can you share your experience of survival during the genocide? And how does that experience live in you now?
That's a interesting question. So my experience, I summarize it in being lucky. I consider myself a very lucky person. I think any survivor will tell you there is no skill, there is nothing you can do to survive what we survived. You just happen to be lucky and it wasn't your day, period. I don't know how anyone would describe it otherwise. you can't live an experience like that and don't leave unshaken, traumatized. I think it has affected maybe trust when you see a neighbor killing a neighbor, husbands killing their wives, kids, 13-year-olds killing their teachers, all that, it shocks you. And by the time you start to process it, you gotta run. So the trauma is there. But I also think you learn so much through an experience like that. I always say that I went through a tunnel, right, at 13-year-old, and during the 2 months I was hiding and running for my life, I feel like I came out as a grown human being, because not only I had to run for my life, but I had to save my brother who was 3 months old, I had to take care of my mother. And then the aftermath too of the genocide, cleaning dead bodies and having to figure out how to live again. Before the genocide, I was going through some personal, teenage kid, and not sure if was happy to live and all that. And surviving and fighting to live and seeing how life is short, it really empowered me to live my life to the fullest. So I think when I survived, I made a decision to live my life to the fullest and live it for myself, live it for those who don't have a chance to live it. And I also think it has taught me not to take things for granted. When you survive something like that, it either breaks you or kills you, but I also think it can be a mixture, right? Yeah. Some days I'm broken and some days I'm strong for it. So it's hard to answer that question, but it definitely leaves you different in good ways and bad ways. And
so it's a fabric that you've woven inside yourself.
It's a wave of emotions. It's emotional. Yeah. But it can also be the stone you stand on. Yeah. But it can also be the hole you fall in some days. So that's being honest and being a human.
Yeah. Muhoza, during those 2 months, were you with your family hiding, or what was that? Who were you with during those 2 months?
So I started with my family in the house, and then we went to a convent where we stayed for maybe a week and a half. And if that convent got invaded, we tried to get on a in pickup truck or a quality pickup truck, but it's what do you call those yeah, it's those big pickup trucks that are used to carry stones. And we were trying to leave the country and we were not successful. So when we came back, we split, and I stayed with my mother and my little brother who was 3 months old. My sister went to hide in a hospital. My little brother went to hide in another high school. So basically we spread from each other. We didn't see each other again for maybe a month and a half. Yeah.
Also, when your family was reunited, did your family conduct any rituals of healing, and was anything discussed?
I would say no. Immediately after, you don't have time to process, honestly. And I think in the African culture, we keep everything inside. We don't necessarily share. And also in our culture, we had to put on the tough face, I would say. So many people went through so much, but they didn't want to share because maybe it would be a sign of weakness in some cases. And honestly, who had time to share? You are trying to build life from scratch. Like, for example, our home was completely invaded and everything was gone. So we had to build life from scratch. So nobody had time to share. But I would say kids shared among kids, and moms shared among moms, and men shared among men. But it has never been like, let's sit together. I don't know how my father survived, really. my sister finds out stuff here and there.
Yes.
She doesn't,
Yeah.
I've never sat down and say, hey, here's my story. This is how I survived. I don't know why we don't do that, but I think also it's a luxury because sometimes going through this, you're causing wounds.
Yeah.
And among survivors, we can't heal each other because we are broken to some level.
Yeah.
So I think that's why maybe families don't share, because the more wounds you open, then you have to heal, and everybody, they're not in a situation. So it's sometimes a luxury to be able to share your experience. But I'm seeing it more, especially during this time in April. It's that time where I think it's allowed to do it. The communities come together and more stories are coming out and more families are sharing. And it's been a while too. I think we're not afraid of sinking in a hole if we share. Life has come and we're building families, and there's hope. So I think more will be happening as we go.
Yeah, one of the things, Muhoza, that strikes me is all the photographs were destroyed. And photographs sometimes are connected to sharing memories. Was any photographs found or left?
In my situation, none, zero. We lost everything. And actually that has impacted me because I tend not to take pictures. I tend to take them in my heart because I know like that, nobody's gonna take away from that.
It's a beautiful, beautiful set.
And it really has affected me. I don't have pictures of that much in my life, which is not a good thing. So the little pictures we saved are from my aunt who lived abroad, and she loves pictures, so she has saved tons of pictures. But I mean, not many people have pictures.
In a country where neighbor killed neighbor, is forgiveness possible? And what are the limits of forgiveness? If not forgiveness, what are the conditions necessary for healing to begin and to sustain itself?
Wow, that's deep.
Well, we hear so much, the term forgiveness is used, and it's used a lot now. And it's hard sometimes to know what we even mean by it.
First, I would say it's a personal journey, right? I think it's a long, personal, unpredictable journey. I think it depends on what's in your cup, maybe to begin with. It depends on maybe some rely on religion, for example. It depends on what your experience is. It depends on your personality is. I was impacted by the genocide, but I did not lose as much as my friends, for example. I know friends who lost a mother, a father, a grandmother, siblings. They're alone. And I don't know what forgiveness is for that kind of person. If I go home and I would see my mom, and I'll go home, I'll see my father. So it's completely different. Personally, I struggled with it. But it has evolved as well. Immediately after the genocide, I basically wanted to revenge. And with time, I don't want to talk about it. It has happened. I don't want to talk about it. Don't bring it to me. As I grow, I'm like, okay, now I understand that those who did it, some meant it, some were pushed to do it. Now I look at it and say, well, God will punish them and I gotta move on. I also have learned that sometimes forgiveness is for you. It's not necessary for those who've done it. But I definitely know it's long. I used to think that you have to forget in order to forgive. And I think that you could forget slowly. I don't think there's 100% forgiveness in some situations. And it could be today you feel like you're forgiven, tomorrow. I just think it's a spectrum. It is not a set stone. It's a personal journey, and it can change today, tomorrow. It's really, it's a journey.
It's not a steady line. It has lots of ups and downs.
I've known people who said, good example, who said, I've forgiven, I'm good. Then they become parents. And then they realized the baby, they can't hand the baby to their mother or their father.
Yeah.
And then they went back in the loop.
Yeah.
So it is a personal journey. It can change. It's complex. So for me, I have my days. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be honest. So
And it's what, 29 years now?
29 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today, 29 years.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see with this next generation, what happens.
It's very interesting you say that, because what happened to us, we inherited from the ones before us. So that responsibility is on us.
Yeah.
Whatever we do today will determine what happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
Generation trauma is real. And healing and forgiveness, I think if you can heal without forgiving, I don't think the two are connected or can be connected. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you can heal, then you would kind of change the circle. You're not going to transfer that generation trauma to the next generation. I think it's hard for my parents who have lived it twice. It's hard for me who's lived it once. It might be easier for my sister, for example, who was born after, depending on what we do.
Yeah.
So it's different categories.
Yeah.
The Rwanda is small, but it's like mixed bags of traumas, you know? So it's not one solution for all.
Right.
It's a little tricky. So, but
it's interesting. In Rwanda now, the president has mandated you don't identify your tribe you come from. So there is an effort to try to limit identifications.
Yeah.
So healing, as you said, is a long journey, very long journey. You've now lived in Reading. How has the Reading community contributed to your healing?
I think it was it, you know, for me. First, it's hard to heal if you are still in the same environment where the trauma happened. So the fact that I was able to pack and live and come in a different world, that was definitely a foundation. Secondly, I could not have landed in a much better family that understood what happened in Rwanda, that was loving, generous. They really helped me to trust again. And I don't think you can heal without trusting. I'm not saying I trust 100%, but I am better than what I came when I came to Reading. So that's from the trauma itself. But as far as building me as a human being, I say that I was reborn when I came to Reading. The Ebbets, I think Kate is on Zoom watching, Jeb and Judy, who made me helped me connect with them. I think they really understood how broken I was, and their mission number one was to heal my wounds, and they did that. They showed me love and cared for me. And then the second piece is before I came to the US, I took a course for a day, interculture course to teach me life in America, or just to know a little bit about America. But I don't think that was maybe 1% of what I was going to expect to see in America. So living in an American family, they set the bar very high. They demanded nothing but hard work for me, and they showed it to me, and they opened the world to me. And I mean, and the Reading community as well, they've been very welcoming, especially when I came a parent and had my kids raised here. That's all they know. They don't know Rwanda. They know Reading. You know, for me, I know Rwanda. For them, it's Reading. So it's really like a second home. It has been a second home for us. That's one thing I would love to do one day, is to bring as many Reading people to Rwanda so that I can show them my home as well, and give them that exchange. One thing that surprised me about the American family, I guess, or the American culture, was really the giving back culture that it's almost like ingrained in the American people. the passion to give back, the passion to help those in need, the passion to help people that they don't know. We are giving community in Africa, but it's usually our cousins, our aunts. It's not really towards strangers. So that was really something that impacted me, but in a good way, because it saved my life. Here's a family in Reading, Connecticut. I mean, I will stay away from opening my doors to someone who just came from a genocide, but they did. And that really showed me hope, that kindness is alive again. And it saved my life and created a path for me and the rest of my family. So it has been the second foundation of my life.
We're rebuilding a new foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a question, Muhoza, that I think a lot about as a therapist. Memory cuts two ways. We need to remember to honor what happened and those that died. And yet memory can also hold us in bitterness and can enslave us. How will you reconcile those tensions between those balancing those two parts? The memory and also knowing sometimes how to limit the feelings and memories that can get stirred up.
Well, you're asking me as if I know. But acceptance, I mean, you can't fight this stuff. You know, it's bigger than you are, in my opinion. You're gonna have bad days and you're gonna have good days. And recognizing when those days, bad days happen, it's important because that then you can overcome it. Surviving is on bad days, it's a curse. You feel you carry the burden to live the lives for those who did not make it. You feel the pressure to do better because you're living a second chance. Out there, you waste a second chance. And the sadness can pull you sometimes of why me? And you know, a good example, I have had a very good friend of mine who we were hiding together at some point. And when it was time to cross the street, one will cross, and then if it was clear, they will whistle, and then the other two will cross. It was my time to cross. My boots were wet, so I was like, hey, let me get the water out of my boots. And as I'm doing, he's like, okay, I'll go. He crosses the street, they catch him, and they literally kill him while I'm on the other side in the woods, watching it, not able to help him. So he died. It was me to go. He just went without knowing, and his life was taken in front of my eyes. And I say that because every time I go to Rwanda, for example, and I go see his mother, and I remember that I'm here because he gave his life away. So it's bitter. It's sad because his mother has never been the same. He was an amazing young boy, and actually even his brother was more impacted by it because he had a twin brother, by him dying. So some days I remember that he gave his life away for me. I can see what that has done to his family. And but then you look back and say, okay, let me do better for him. So it can be take you down, but it can also be a motivation. But it's not all the time. So I'm not gonna lie and say why it's a motivation every day. It's not. Some days it is, and some days it's not. I can say though, I keep saying I'm a lucky person, so I've become Americanized, knock on wood. I can say that for me, so far it has really been most of the time the source of energy for me to be able to push myself forward and take myself outside of any decision, bad situation. I say this in the office sometimes. Things might be going really bad, and you know, people screaming, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening! It's a bad day." And in my head, I'm like, yeah, it could be worse, And then I'm like, let's do this and get done. So
Yeah.
he has pulled me out of many bad situations.
I'm thinking what a legacy you're giving your children in terms of hope and perseverance and grit.
Let me ask Kyle, what do you think, Kyle?
Where's Kyle?
I torture him sometimes because, one of the discussions he doesn't like. When I came to America, for example, I came with one suitcase that was probably 100 years old. I don't even know where I picked it up from. And $200 in my pocket. And that's how life started. And I've told him the story so many times that when I started, Dad, one suitcase and $200, so, but I think he's young right now, maybe not to appreciate it all, but I think he gets a kick out of it sometimes.
What are the lessons from Rwanda that you wish to impart this evening? So when people walk out of here, maybe they take one thing. What would that one thing be?
I'll say two things. One thing is always be kind. I think one thing that I believe saved me at one point, another time was I got caught by the militias, and one of the people that was killing was our gardener. The bloody machete and big guy, big muscles, and he was killing. And some of them, you have to understand, he's a good guy, but maybe he was taught to kill. I have no idea, but definitely he was there doing it. And when they caught me, they tied me up. There was a big price for whoever is going to find my father. There was $1 million Rwandan franc price for whoever will find my dad. And they were like, okay, we got him, and he's gonna tell us what the dad is. They tie me up, and they were going to boil oil and put my fingers in one by one. That's what they were saying. I don't know exactly if that's what they were going to do. And he comes and grabs me very tight, slaps me big time. And then he says, I will save you, whispers to me, right? And a few minutes later, he screams, oh, more Tutsis over there, let's go get them. And everybody runs. He comes, he unties me, he says, you run, if I catch you again, I'm gonna kill you myself. And I said the story because he was our gardener, he's poor, and he had so many kids. And I would steal like sugar and milk and bread and give him to bring his kids, because he had like 7 kids. I didn't even understand how he could have that many kids. So I would give him food all the time and clothes and hide and give it to him. And I really think he saved me because I was kind to him without knowing. So I always say, one lesson to learn, always be kind. I like that the RES has that big sign, at the school saying be kind. And every time I pass by it, it really gives me those memories. But in general, what happened to Rwanda, I honestly think can happen to anywhere, in any country. Rwandans are very warm people, very funny people. You've been to Rwanda, it's really a beautiful place, very kind, very warm. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to any country. And what we can learn is avoid it. What else can I say? It's really avoid it. Watch the small signs, I guess. I can tell you that looking back, were signs there? Absolutely. But when you're in it, you really don't realize how bad it was, I think. But when I read what was going on then, when I remember the whispering, I remember the teacher saying the Tutsis go there, the Hutus go there, my father being in jail for so long, and many other things I can't even share. The signs were there. It was getting worse, So just watch for the signs and avoid generation trauma, because what we tell our kids, they retain, and they will tell their kids, and it's never going to end.
One thing I'm struck by, Muhoza, is the heroic act of your gardener. That we never know what we're capable of. We're capable of destruction, but we're also capable of heroic acts that are not often recognized.
And I
Right.
think many people fall in that category.
Yeah.
I think there were many. I know in my hometown, it was a very small hometown. It's almost like Reading. It's 45 minutes away from the capital city. And people knew each other.
Mm.
You know, it was really small. And the first week, they didn't kill. They refused to kill. They said, we're not going to kill. We know everybody. Why are we killing? They had to bring in an army from Kigali,
Mm.
give them machetes and say, stop killing or we're going to kill you.
Mm.
And that's how they started. And you know, they did it day one, day two, and then it became
Right. Yeah.
natural. And they went back to Kigali and
Yeah.
couldn't control it anymore.
Yeah.
But they had to be pushed to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
they did not initiate right away.
Yeah.
So he was a good guy. And then also things like, well, if you kill them, you get their house and their
Yeah.
car. Well, how are you gonna pay for it if you keep it without a job?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a doctor, you're not. He lives in a nice house because he has a job, you don't have a job.
Right.
So, but they didn't have the chance to process.
Right.
They just believed what they're told. And you have to remember there was a national radio going around and talking and
Right.
moving, you know, motivating people to do the killing.
So the very last question, which what you're really leading into, what are the responsibilities each of us have to prevent the cycles of othering and hating that continue in the world? I remember when I was in Rwanda and I was with Jojo, and he went to the church, you know, and churches where people hid, and they became sites of slaughter. And I remember, I'll never forget this. As I'm walking into the church, there was a sign, never again. And yet it continues to happen in our world. How can we take responsibility individually and collectively to stop some of the cycle of hatred that continues?
That's, I knew that I would be living in the world, right? But I think, for example, in Rwanda, I think the genocide was successful because the educated minority was able to brainwash, control the uneducated majority. So for me, I feel that especially in rural countries, or, you know, rural or poor countries, it's through education. We really have to educate so people can have a voice to say, no, that doesn't make sense. I'm not doing it. He's my neighbor, you know. Poverty. Obviously, if you're poor and a minister comes and says, do this, I'll give you that, the choice is easy in some cases. So education, eradicating poverty, that's one of the things that are really, I think we talked about healing. One thing that has really started to heal me more is actually doing that. Is Ed started a non-for-profit after I met him, actually. It's a very funny story. I met him once and we stayed in a bar until like, what, 4 a.m. talking about Rwanda. Little did I know that he was giving me a therapy session. If he had told me, then I would have run out of that room immediately, but he didn't tell me. So after that, he went to visit Rwanda and he fell in love and he created a non-for-profit and we worked together and I helped him. But until we really started doing things like the scholarships that we do and put poor kids through schools and educate them and then see them, you know, change lives in their homes, like get a job and then renovate their parents' home and buy a mattress for their family members, or, you know, in return, send a brother to school. I think that it's like turning the bad into a good. And the more I count the goodness, the good things happen, it's really making that healing feel real. So it's really doing things that impact the communities, because there's so many poor communities out there, not educated. So the more education we give them, the more poverty we eradicate, the more power they have to say no to something like that in the future. Speeches don't do it. I don't think so. Yeah.
So Muhoza, I want to thank you for opening up your heart, because I'm struck by it. I love that image. You take pictures with your heart. So take pictures of the people who came out tonight and your care. So I thank you all. We want to open it up for questions. And it really, it always takes one brave person to start. And Matt, since you're a teacher, okay?
I have inside information because I've been able to hear the conversation so many times, and the way that you present it to the seventh graders, where you integrate those elements of compassion with atrocity. It's just really amazing. One of the things that you talk about a lot, or you have with the students, is surviving the survival. Is that something maybe you could speak to so that everybody else can hear that as well? I think it's really profound.
Oh, thank you. I think when I talk about it, I would change it a little bit because maybe we're majority of people here are older, but surviving is easy. You're rolling a dice, you die or survive. There's nothing to do. Surviving the survival, that's 30 years later, we're still surviving. 80 years later, we're still going to survive. It's, if you talk to someone who survived the Holocaust, they will tell you the same thing. So you have to rebuild life from scratch. You have to carry the atrocity, the memories. You have to, when everybody around you is, usually when you go through something, you rely on a support system. So picture Rwanda where the entire support system is going through the same thing as you are going through. So there's no one to help anybody. So not only you are broken, not only your support system is broken, the country is a mess and the future is unpredictable. So, and then you always, I always walk with the fear of losing it all. Like, so every time I celebrate something or reach a milestone, sometimes something pulls me back and say, well, you could lose it tomorrow. You know, so that anxiety, the fear, and, you know, I mentioned it also is you always carry the burden of enjoying it while there's nobody else to, or other people didn't, who were smarter, brighter, and for that. I am lucky that I got to enjoy my parents for a while, but if you didn't have your parents and you're going through, you know, traditionally, for example, in Rwanda, when we have our weddings, they come to your family to ask for the bride, and they usually ask your parents. If you don't have a parent, and your uncles are gone, your uncles' uncles are gone, you know, you go rent someone, pay someone money to come and pretend to be your parent. This is a day that you're supposed to be enjoying and sharing with your family. Now you actually have to pay someone money to pretend to be your parent to give you away as a bride. So that's where I say that surviving the survival is really harder because it keeps pulling from the back, and yet you still have to survive. So it's not like you have a choice not to survive, you know. So it's the longest hard journey. I think the smoke is there, whether we look at it or not. Just that the fire is not there. So every survivor is walking around with box of smoke of whatever that happened to them, and they have to keep pushing it so they can forward. So it is the hardest part, because surviving is luck. You're just lucky to survive. But I don't think someone can say, I'm lucky to survive the survival. It's hard. So I'm lucky I have my support system. I'm lucky I came to America. I'm lucky I have my family. So rebuilding, it's a long journey and hard.
And healing never stops. It's ongoing for a lifetime.
It's lifetime, you know, you go to therapy, you scratch it, you bleed again, you heal it, move on. You have a kid and there's nobody to share that joy with. You know, so it's an evolving, keeps going, keep hammering, but it is possible. Just not, it's not a perfect road. It's bumpy.
It's bumpy. I'm just thinking just the courage to share this tonight with everybody is another act of healing.
It's my way of giving back to the community. It has taken me a long time to do it. Many people have asked me to do it. Mad was, he asked a few times, but doing it for so the reason why we're doing today, for those who don't know, it's because Matt and I have been doing it for the 7th grade. And we thought that the next level is to get the parents involved to hear the story, so that next week when I talk to the kids, then the kids go home, then they would have that exchange conversation about it. So the kids will learn, but they go home and then maybe it's not a shared experience. So we talking to parents and the community at large so that it can become a shared experience with the entire community.
Some other questions?
Spirituality, you argue with God, you go, what happens? Do a lot of people say the same thing? What happens and how does that dance of the divine work or not work?
Are you asking me if I'm?
Yeah, it's just, did that factor into the survival and the survival?
I've never heard that question before, so I'm thinking a little bit. I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy, so religion was very important. I have to say that during the genocide, I lost my faith in a way, religious wise, but I think I grew spiritually, right? So I might not be necessarily religious, but I think I believe in the good. I believe in what goes around comes around. And I have a mission to make a difference in the world as I live my second chance. Is that religiously driven? No, but it might be close to that. So yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. I think it's really important and it puts a beautiful face to this horrible tragedy that happens and it becomes very real and comes from your heart. And thank your whole family for sharing this because it can't be easy. And I was just wondering about your family. Did some families stay in Rwanda and do you ever think about moving back? Or I just wonder how your family feels about the country and how you feel about that.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. We luckily, my entire family, so my father lost, this is actually very interesting for the audience to understand. So my mother, who's a Hutu, lost more people than my father, who's a Tutsi during the genocide. So when you talk about siblings, aunts, uncles, right? But as far as my parents survived, my siblings all survived. Unfortunately, with time, many of them have passed. But we just came back from Rwanda in December. My sister got married and I have one sister that still lives in Rwanda. My sister one lives here. I have a brother who lives in Oregon. I have another brother who lives in Belgium. So we have kind of all fled the country. But it's considered right now one of the safest countries in Africa. There's law and order. It's beautiful. It's growing. It's developing. If you went to Rwanda, I would highly encourage to go visit. Reach out to me if you would like to get some suggestions. Actually, that's one of my dreams. I think I've said it before, is to organize trips and bring reading people to Rwanda, especially the high school kids one day. But it's really, you won't tell. We have done a very good job recovering the country, our spirits. You go to Rwanda today, you see how joyful the people are, and we like to talk and laugh and really enjoy, joie de vivre, they say that in Africa, you all know that the genocide happened, really. So we're recovering, the wounds are still there. We're recovering, the country is recovering, the people are recovering. There's definitely a lot of work to do. Definitely. We can afford the therapy, but I think if I won $1 billion, I would definitely give everybody 10 hours of therapy sessions for the entire country, because we definitely need it and we can afford it. It's a luxury to do. So, yeah.
Thank the virtual audience, but I'll let you go to my first. Just have a follow-up on that. I was standing at the village market the other day, small grocery store in a small town, and I'm holding an avocado, and I knew I was coming here tonight, and I had this vision of a small grocery store in a small town in Rwanda. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them, I would imagine. And what I suddenly thought was, you look over and there's a woman looking at the lettuce, or a man looking at the lettuce, and he macheted your father to death and threw him in a well. How does that work, Muhoza?
My question would be, how would that not work? Were you in a country like Rwanda where you don't have a choice but to coexist? Does that make sense? We don't really have a choice but coexist. But I would say that those who really carried out the killings are not in the streets, they're in jail. The majority of them. Those who showed remorse and asked for forgiveness, they have been reintegrated in the community. So if you really owned up to what you did, asked for forgiveness, the community forgive you, then the community is working on welcoming you. But I would imagine there's always that shame. And you would see that many those people who really did the atrocities don't necessarily go in the markets and walk around as much as they want. If they do, it's really because they have owned up, they have showed remorse, they have apologized, and the community has really forgiven you and have helped you to come back into the community. There are cases, not many, but the majority of the ones who did the bad are definitely in jail or fled the country in Congo and not longer living in Rwanda.
Muhoza, could you share a little bit, people may not know, the gacaca that happened after the genocide? Because that was an attempt at what you're talking about.
So a gacaca is, if I can do it justice, it's almost like a community court. So you have thousands and thousands of people who killed. They are in jail. The country is poor. They don't have the resources to feed them, house them, and all this. So there was an education system basically talk to the community and say, if they would, one, on to what they did. Second, some knew where the dead bodies were hidden. So they did the work to come and say, well, I was part of the group that came to that house and we killed this family. The bodies are buried there. I am so sorry for what I've done. This is what I have done it. And ask for forgiveness. They would maybe ask them to give 4 cows to the family as a gesture of asking for forgiveness, and they will reintegrate the community. So there's a group of people that asked for forgiveness genuinely, and they have been forgiven. And that was a community-led court, because the court system could not go through that many people. It's impossible. I mean, it's completely impossible to do.
That's just, I mean, it hasn't happened in any other situation, and genocide has happened in other countries, but that, what you just described, I think is how the country's starting to heal, and it isn't in the situation that we are. I mean, the hatred against Jews that is still happening and everything else. I mean, but that community healing.
Yeah, it's chunking
amazing.
it, right? Yeah, you chunk it because you have 100 people. The community church, the community court will do a group. The traditional court will do a group, and eventually maybe 60% of the community will be addressed over time. So there are still people in jail. There's still people in the court system. There's still people who still go through the gacaca. And I would say it has been successful, maybe not 100% successful. We have to be honest also that some areas didn't work as good, but it definitely did good in many situations.
Question from the virtual audience. This participant thanks you very much for your program. Oops, sorry, excuse me. And the question is, and she also is involved in a nonprofit for Rwanda and finds the people incredibly kind. She said, do you believe in Rwanda today there is little distinction between the Hutus and Tutsi, considering, I'm not sure what she means there. And if so, is it working to help alleviate any racial differences, or is it still underlying?
This question tends to get political sometimes, and I try to avoid political questions. So let me answer it from a numbers perspective, right? So it will be 29 years since the genocide happened. And probably the first 10 years, it was chaotic, trying to rebuild the country. Maybe 5 years later, we realized that maybe that's a very good strategy to really, I don't like the Tutsi-Hutu distinction because it has only proven to cause problems, right? It doesn't add anything, doesn't add any value. I think for the next generation, it's definitely going to clean the problem as new people born and they don't know what Tutsi Hutu. realistically speaking, a Hutu in Rwanda knows they're a Hutu, a Tutsi in Rwanda knows they're Hutu. It doesn't matter whether we don't say it, you don't say it. So the older generation, it's impossible to take that out of their system. But the good thing is, you know, when you ask your ID, nobody's gonna know. So 80% will just not be discriminated against because it doesn't show on your ID. While a long time ago, it was visible and it could be used against you. My humble opinion, I would love, I think, if indeed that's part of who we are, Tutsi Hutu, I would feel maybe more comfortable if it was a thing, but people didn't care. Like, you tall, I'm short, short, I'm tall. Why do we need to hide that you tall, you short? It doesn't mean anything. You don't get a job because you're short. You don't get a job because you're tall, maybe basketball. But, you know, I think that devaluing the difference, even though we know and see it, to me, I think will be the best solution. By not talking about it, sometimes I feel that it might actually add some power to it because it's hidden, you know, when you hide sugar, the kids steal it. But when you put on the counter, they see, they don't touch it. So that's my crazy philosophy. I think it will be good to just say, well, you Tutsi, you Hutu, so what? And then move on. But there's so much trauma that maybe this is the best solution, which I support 100%. But it's still, when that's why I said number wise, 10 years surviving, 5 years thinking about strategy, 10 years we're trying to see if it works. We're not gonna know if it works until 20, 30 years from now. I do believe it's gonna make a difference. How much, I don't know, but I'm definitely behind it.
What's interesting, Melissa, there's a generational shift. There's more people now born after the genocide in the country.
Yeah. And those people born after genocide, you know, my sister is a good example. I don't know. I think she knows who she is, but she doesn't care. Because so what, right? So I think to me that's the hope is like, I don't care who you are. Good for you. You tall, good. You have white hair, good. So move on. I think that would be your ball. Yeah, there you go. Bald, too bad, you know? So that's I think will be the strategy I would use. But again, we're talking about a rural country. We're talking about, sometimes we think forgetting or ignoring is the way to heal. Most of the time, whether it works or not, yeah, I don't know. Time will tell.
Yeah, really accepting difference and not putting a value judgment.
Exactly, accepting the difference. Period. Doesn't, so you don't get a job because you're a Tutsi, or you don't get a job because you're a Tutsi. I think that's the problem. Being a Tutsi or Hutu, I don't see a problem with that. It's associating a value or a devalue because of that is the problem.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey from leaving the country? How did you get out, and what did you do when you got here before you got to Reading? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I was able to get asylum to migrate to the US. And usually when you're a single person and you get asylum, they find a family somewhere in America that is willing to host you. So it's a program, they host you for 6 months. And through that 6 months, you get your green card, you get your first job, you save your security deposit, and then you be on your own. And I had found a family, was it North Dakota? South Dakota, right? One of the Dakotas, North Dakota. And my uncle, so my aunt is married to Judy, who just asked a question. And Judy lives in Westport, and she knew a family in Reading that some point they went out for dinner, for a drink or a walk. And my mom, Kate, she said, well, it would be nice to have a foreign student stay with us for a little bit, right? That was maybe when the genocide was happening, who knows, right? And when I got the asylum, Judy learned that I'll be coming to America, but going to North Dakota. She rang Kate and she said, "Your dream came true. I found a foreign student for you. What do you think?" Right. So that's how I end up in Reading, because Kate and Jeb lived in Reading and they welcomed me here. So I came to Reading. It was supposed to be 6 months, basically help me get a job, which they did. My first job was a Kararuzi. I was a bagger, a Kararuzi, and a cashier in 4 months. And then I went to school at Westcon, got my BA there. My first white collar job, I worked at the Wilton Bank as a teller at the bank. And I worked for a relocation company as after college. And so it was supposed to be 6 months. We really bonded with the family. When it was ready to start talking about leaving, they said, "You're not going anywhere." And I had my kids there, and until they retired and moved to Vermont. So it's really it's a very good journey. But again, I'm a very lucky person. The stars have been aligned for me. I'm not gonna lie. Not everybody goes through the same journey that I went. To be lucky as I was to have a caring family to support me in a small town community that really gives me the same feeling I had home. I grew up in a small community, a small town. I think I probably would have gone crazy if I went into the city. I think coming to Reading, it's similar to my hometown, right? A very small community, small town. Yeah, so that's where I've been for now 20 years. Never left. I've tried many times, but it hasn't worked.
Fear and resentment, regardless of ethnicity, can be used to turn any group of people against any other group of people in any country.
100%, because the Tutsis who killed two in the genocide, Tutsis that killed Tutsis and Hutus that killed Hutus during the genocide. So really the genocide was against the Tutsis, but many Hutus were killed during the genocide, and they were killed by Hutus. So I really, again, I would say that not being educated, being poor, where someone with better education, with more money, can literally control you and brainwash you. It can happen in any country. It's not only Rwanda that is poor, that has a majority of the population that is not educated. I really think can happen anywhere. Yeah, economics play a big role. I think it played a major role in Rwanda as well, 100%.
Going everything, like, was it scary? Was it traumatizing? How did it feel like?
Thank you, Kayla. So I was 13 years old. I was younger than Kyle and a little bit older than you. And at the beginning, because I couldn't leave the house by myself. So when my parents said, "Now you gotta go in the woods and be by yourself," I was like, "Yay, now I can go and do everything I want to do because I'm free. I don't have anybody to tell me." But then when I realized that it was actually war and I was going to be outside in the woods, no food, no water, and had to take care of my little brother who was 3 months old. He had no food and he kept crying all the time while trying to hide. Alberto, right? Trying to hide, it really became traumatizing because, and I think this is my experience when I was in the genocide, is that you did not know if you would survive the next hour, the next 30 minutes, the next minute. It was literally like that. When the sun went down, they stopped killing. And that's when you could literally feel like you survived the day. And we used the night to move around to go look for food. But during the day when it was happening, I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know how many days I was running for. It didn't matter because I didn't know if I'll be there the next 20 minutes. That feeling of not knowing what's next hour is gonna be like is definitely traumatizing. Yeah. Good question, Kayla.
Yeah, excellent question.